Before he was building monster trucks and breaking YouTube with diesel-powered chaos, David Heavy D Sparks was just a kid from Utah with a serious obsession. Engines, power, and anything loud enough to shake the ground. Long before television cameras showed up, he was already building wild custom trucks in his backyard, turning scrap into head turners. He didn't grow up rich, but he was always hustling, buying junk vehicles, flipping them for profit, and using that money to chase even bigger builds. Eventually, Heavy D and his best friend, Diesel Dave Kiley, turned their passion into a brand. Diesel Sellers, a one-stop shop for diesel truck fanatics. What started with social media posts and sketchy garage shots exploded into viral gold. Their builds weren't just big. They were absurdly massive, decked out with chrome stacks and lifts so high you needed a ladder to get in. It didn't take long before their content caught the attention of producers at Discovery Channel. The result? Diesel Brothers, a full-blown reality series that launched in 2016 and turned the crew into overnight TV stars. But this wasn't your average car show. Heavy D brought energy, chaos, and a showman's flair. He didn't just build trucks, he turned them into art pieces on steroids. With every episode, the builds got crazier, the stunts got riskier, and the audience got bigger. By 2017, Heavy D wasn't just a mechanic, he was a brand. Monster truck tours, sponsorship deals, charity giveaways, viral YouTube videos, everything he touched turned into horsepower and views. But just as the engines roared louder, something darker was building behind the scenes. While Diesel Brothers was racking up views and Heavy D's empire looked unstoppable, something unexpected crept in from the outside. Not from a rival shop, not from TV ratings, but from the courtroom. In 2016, a group of Utah doctors filed a federal lawsuit against Heavy D's company, claiming that the Diesel Sellers crew had been knowingly modifying trucks to bypass emissions systems, specifically to roll coal, which sends thick black smoke spewing from the exhaust. For some fans, that was part of the diesel culture. But to the Environmental Protection Agency and state regulators, it was a big DMN problem. The accusations weren't just about a few modified trucks. They were about a systematic pattern of pollution. The doctors argued that Heavy D's team had been turning off emissions controls on purpose, building vehicles that spewed harmful toxins into the air around Utah communities. And it wasn't a civil slap on the wrist. They were accused of violating the Clean Air Act, one of the most aggressively enforced environmental laws in the country. At first, Heavy D didn't back down. He and the team claimed they were just entertainers, not environmental villains. But the legal system saw it differently. After years of litigation, a Utah judge handed down a brutal penalty, over $850,000 in fines. The message was clear. Modifying diesel engines for entertainment wasn't just frowned upon, it was illegal. The fine would later be reduced to around $600,000 on appeal. But the damage wasn't just financial. For a brand built on outlaw energy and loud power, being tied to pollution and federal violations started to chip away at the shine. Heavy D, who once joked about haters in every episode, now had the government breathing down his neck, and fans asking questions he couldn't joke his way out of. But the lawsuit was only the beginning. What came next hit even closer to home. When the smoke cleared, literally and legally, Heavy D was left in a very different position than where he started. The lawsuit didn't bankrupt him, but it bruised his brand, tarnished the rebel image, and forced a hard pivot. Suddenly, the Wild Diesel Outlaw Act wasn't just edgy, it was legally risky. And for someone whose entire identity was built on pushing limits, that changed everything. The show Diesel Brothers kept airing, but fans started noticing subtle changes. Less focus on engine mods, more careful language on emissions, and a sense that the raw energy that once defined the show had been toned down. In interviews and social posts, Heavy D kept things upbeat, but longtime fans could see it. The legal heat had taken its toll. Behind the scenes, there were ripple effects. Diesel Sellers, the flagship business, had to tighten its operations. The carefree builds turned into calculated brand-safe projects. Online, some fans cheered the shift, seeing it as a sign of growth. Others, they felt like the edge had been sanded off, and the raw, chaotic charm of the early days was starting to fade. And Heavy D himself, he started stepping back from the spotlight in subtle ways. No dramatic statements, no televised breakdowns, just a slow, quiet change in pace. It wasn't burnout, not yet, but something was shifting. The Diesel King was evolving, but no one expected what he'd do next. Heavy D has never been one to sit still, especially when things get tough. So after the lawsuit and the shift in public perception, he did what most people wouldn't. He pivoted. Hard. In 2024, news broke that Heavy D had acquired something no one saw coming. The rights to the canceled Nikola Badger, a long-hyped but never-released electric truck that had become a symbol of overpromising in the EV world. Most of the automotive industry them had already written the Badger off as vaporware, especially after Nikola's high-profile scandals and plummeting stock. But Heavy D saw an opportunity in the wreckage. He secured the rights, formed a new company, Ember Motors, and started building his own version of what the Badger was supposed to be. A rugged, fully electric off-road monster that didn't compromise on power or presence. It was a massive gamble. The diesel world had been his kingdom, and now he was stepping into electric territory, a space many of his longtime fans saw as the enemy. But Heavy D wasn't trying to please everyone. He was trying to evolve. He poured time, money, and his reputation into EMBR. He posted teaser builds, shared updates on development, and even hinted at a full-scale manufacturing plan. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, because launching an EV brand isn't like customizing a lifted truck. It's expensive, heavily regulated, and brutally competitive. And while Heavy D seemed excited publicly, you could hear something in his tone: exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from working late, but from carrying the weight of reinvention. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, came another shock. For years, Heavy D's shop was more than just a garage. It was a shrine to everything he'd built: custom semis, lifted builds, military-grade rigs, and million-dollar monsters filled every corner of the diesel seller's compound. Fans traveled from across the country just to glimpse the machines they'd seen on screen. But in mid-tour, that all started to change. Without warning, Heavy D posted a video with a jarring title: "We're selling everything." And he wasn't kidding. Trucks, parts, tools, gear, shop equipment, it was all being liquidated. At first, fans thought it might be a marketing stunt or a rebrand, but the tone of the video was different. This wasn't clickbait. This was real. He called it a major life change. No drama, no meltdown, just a calm, almost reflective explanation that it was time to downsize, let go of the excess, and focus on something new. But for those who'd followed him from the beginning, it felt like the end of an era. The energy in his voice wasn't hype, it was tired. Focused, yes, but tired in a way fans weren't used to seeing. Speculation flooded the comments. Was he going bankrupt? Facing more legal pressure? Burned out? Starting over? Heavy D didn't say much, just that he was clearing space to make room for what's next. And the scale of the sale wasn't subtle, it was practically everything. For someone who once defined himself by horsepower and hustle, selling off the kingdom raised one very big question. Was he walking away from everything he'd built, or preparing to rebuild it from scratch? And what came next only deepened the mystery. For months after the garage sale, Heavy D stayed relatively quiet. No big announcements, no new show, just the occasional update on social media, where longtime fans noticed something strange. The trucks were gone, the chaos was gone, and in their place was a different kind of content. Simpler, more thoughtful, sometimes even emotional. He began posting more personal stories. His family, his health, his mindset. It wasn't about fame or flash anymore, it was about reflection. And underneath it all, a pattern began to emerge. Heavy D wasn't quitting. He was resetting. The truth is, building an empire at full throttle for a decade will wear down even the strongest. Between the lawsuit, the pressure to constantly entertain, the pivot into electric vehicles, and running a business that demands 24/7 attention, it's no surprise Heavy D hit a wall. But unlike others in the spotlight, he didn't crash and burn. He pumped the brakes. In one video, he talked about how he'd been chasing bigger, louder, faster for years, but never stopped to ask if he still loved the game. And it was that realization, more than any scandal or burnout, that pushed him to clear the slate. The Ember Motors project is still in motion, but with a quieter tone. Less hype, more development. Heavy D hasn't walked away from the automotive world, but he's walking through it differently now. More intentional. Less showman, more strategist. And while some fans miss the over-the-top Diesel Brothers energy, others see the change as growth. Because behind the lifted trucks and TV edits was always a guy who knew how to build. And now, he's building something deeper, even if it's not all on camera. But the mystery still lingers.